Hello, hello. Let's let our audience build here on Zoom for a minute or so. I'm Brett at brettjfox.com. Glad to have everybody here this afternoon. As you get a look inside my closet, it looks like we'll let that be. It adds to the fun. Anyways, if you have questions for me and you are on Zoom, you can ask them on Zoom in the chat box. If you are on YouTube or the Q&A box, either one will work. And if you're on YouTube and you want to ask me questions, you can ask them to me on YouTube as well, as I try and make that happen. And we should be able to do either one of those quite easily. There we go. Just get everything set up here. Just a couple of technical things and I'm ready to rock. So if you have questions for me on either one of the platforms, please ask me questions in the chat box on YouTube. Ask me questions in the chat box on Zoom. And I'm ready to go here on a beautiful Thursday morning in California for me. Not sure where everybody else is, but at least for me, I'm in beautiful California, so can't complain. So let's get started. And I have a first question, which Christopher asked about, well, I've got my pitch ready and I want to find partners. In other words, I want to find investors. How do I go about doing this? And I think this is a really good, important question to ask. And let me answer that for you as best I can and help you out here in terms of how to get a really good answer to this question. So great. And it's great that you got your pitch ready. It's great that you're ready to go. First things first. First rule of finding investors is number one, not all investors are created equal. And what do I mean by this? There are early stage investors. There are late stage investors. Those are not the same thing. Early stage investors rarely invest in late stage companies. Late stage investors rarely invest in early stage companies. So that's one thing that we have to look for. So if we're early stage, and I'm going to assume most of the people on this call or on our webinar today are very early stage, you want to be early. You want to be looking for early stage investors, not late stage investors. That's the first thing. Second way we can slice the pie here is if we are, for example, a software company and we are looking for investors, do we want to find investors that only invest in biotech, that only invest in hardware, that only invest in medical devices? The odds of any of those investors investing in our software company are about zero. So what's the second rule here? We want to find investors that invest in our area. Full stop. So that's the second thing that we want to do. The third thing we want to do, the third thing is now that we've kind of said, okay, we need to have early stage investors that invest in our software company. Third thing, ideally, it's not as important in today's world as it used to be, but it's still important. Third thing, geography. Geography is important. In other words, where are our investors located? Like for me, I'm in California. Where should I be looking for investors? In California. If you are in New Zealand, where should you be looking for investors? In New Zealand. If you're in Africa, where should you be looking for investors? In Africa. You get the idea. If you're in Europe, you want to be looking in Europe. And specifically, if you're in the UK, look in the UK. If you're in France, look in France. That's the idea here. So we want to have geographic proximity to where we are. We want to have stage relevant to what we're doing, and we want to have the type of product service that we're doing. All these things need to meet for us to have the right investor. That's the way we do this. Now, how do we find these people? Well, if we don't have a network, one thing I would recommend is, by the way, most people's networks are bigger than they think. So ask everybody you come in contact with, do you know anybody who might be interested in investing in my company? You can hear a lot of no's, but every once in a while I hear, yeah, I think I know this person. Would you mind introducing me? Sure, great. And you start building your network up that way. And if that person turns you down, you ask that person, and you'll build up your network that way. The other way is through cold introductions. Cold introductions work. I have an email about this, not an email. I have a video on this as well, so you can look at the video and you can watch it. And I'll walk you through how do you find investors. But yes, you can find investors that way. Now, a great tool that you can use is Crunchbase. Now, Crunchbase has a free trial that you can use for, I think it's 14 days, if I'm not mistaken. So, and you can look by geography, you can look through all these various filters that I talked about and build up a nice list of potential investors. So there are ways to do this. You just have to be persistent, ask everybody you meet for help, everybody you talk to for help, and you will. If you've got something good, you will find investors. Now, final piece of our puzzle here, final piece is you have to be ready for investment as well. It's not enough. It is not enough that we have something good that we think and it's in prototype stage or whatever. It's not enough to have that. We need to be ready. What does ready mean? Depending upon stage, it might mean that we actually need to have traction or customers. If we're very early on, that probably means we're going to be dealing with friends, family, and co-founders and ourselves. That's how we're going to fund our company. You get the idea. So all these things matter. Traction matters. All these things matter in terms of finding investors. So I hope that answers your question on that. If you have questions for me, please put them in the chat box for me on either Zoom or YouTube, and I will be happy to answer your questions for you at this point in time. Any questions you have on anything to do with startups, ask the question. If you want to ask questions about the weather here in California, that's cool too. Whatever it is that's on your mind, go for it. So ask your questions. I'll be happy to answer them for you. Okay, let's see. Next question. What do I do if I don't have a prototype that's ready? Okay. What do you do if you have a prototype that's not ready? You get the prototype ready. What if it costs too much money? Okay, this is yet another common challenge and you hear this all the time, is that I am building something that is quote unquote hardware, and investors do not want hardware. How do I go about doing this? How do I get investors when it's going to cost so much money, to do this? Well, we have to find a way, because this is the problem in today's world. And investors are not a charity. So for you, because investors are not a charity service, you have to find investors where they are, full stop. So, and you have to meet them where they are. You can't rewrite the rules just because you need more money, you need more time, whatever it might be. I wish I could tell you something different, but that's just not the way it is. So you have to find a way. That's kind of the comment that I would have for you. So I wish it was easier. It's not. It is a super challenging thing to do. It just is. So you have to find a way to do this. So you have to, which means for us, we have to get to our point, being very frugal, being very creative. For example, if we're building something in hardware, maybe there is a way to meet the challenge in software. It happens. And that's what I've seen over and over again. I'll give you a couple different examples of this. When I was raising money for my company, and my company, pure hardware company. And we needed lots of money to get started, but to prove to investors that we could do what we wanted to do, and we got this question from a few different investors, we had to start proving things in software in a hardware company. That's what I did. Another company I'm involved in right now that I've been advising, gosh, for 7 years, company's worth over $1 billion. Another pure hardware company. What did they do at the beginning? They started proving things in software, and they found a way in software. Be creative, find a way. This is what we have to do. Okay, so if you have any questions, put them in the chat box for me, and I'll be happy to answer them on Zoom or YouTube. If you got them in the Zoom section, if you're on Zoom, just put them in the chat box, the Q&A box on Zoom. If you have questions for me on YouTube, just put them in the chat box. So let's see what our questions are. Okay, somebody tells me, hey, Brett, we're doing $1 million in ARR, profitable and cash flow positive. Congratulations, that's cool. We're in the UK, and we're finding it hard to raise funds from the US, and we don't have a good US presence. Yeah, that goes back to what I was talking about. I don't know whether you were on at the beginning, but I was talking about this phenomenon. I don't know how much money you're trying to raise, but that may be one of the challenges. $1 million in ARR is nothing to sneeze at. That is a real business when you're getting to those kind of numbers. I would recommend looking in the UK first. It's harder to raise money if you're in the US and we're trying to raise money in the UK and vice versa. So look in the UK first. I know the UK environment for startups isn't as startup friendly as the United States is, but it doesn't matter. Look in the UK. I don't know how much money you're trying to raise. That may be fitting into it. You may have to reduce the amount of money to get to the investors that you want. That's always a possibility. So you have to deal with what you got. And, you know, if it's not possible, let's say, for example, you're trying to raise $10 million and you're just hearing no, no, no from investor after investor. You're too early, you don't have enough traction. Well, that tells you you've got to reduce the amount of money you're trying to raise. That's the only way that you can do it. So we reduce the amount of money, and maybe that means we have to reduce our plans, go a little slower. So be it. Such is life, right? This is what we got to do. So that, I hope that answers your question. Next question. Mike asks, what are some things every startup founder automatically signs up for if they start their company? Okay. Well, let's see some rules that I can think of. Number one, it's going to be harder than we think. Number two, success takes, this is kind of the same theme, success takes a long time. You're going to have to be fanatical about what you do to be successful, because you're likely to give up if you're not. So those would be two things off the top of my head. So, and just expect, you know, success is not a given. It's not a given just because we want to raise money that money's going to be there. Typically, this is the way I thought about it when I was raising money, is that, and I had a little bit of an advantage because I had been an entrepreneur in residence inside of a venture capital fund before I raised money, and I knew kind of what the deal was and how investors looked at things. But for every 100 face-to-face meetings a venture capitalist or an angel investor takes, they will invest in one company. That's it, just one. So I looked at that and kind of flipped it and said, I've got to meet with 100 investors for me to have a reasonable chance of raising my money. It took me 64. I have another person I'm working with, company's now worth over $1 billion, also interestingly enough. And he met with over 200 investors to raise his latest round of funding. It's hard. It's hard to do things. It's hard to get to $1 million in ARR, the English company that I was talking about at the beginning. It's hard to do these things. It's hard to find good people. We have to keep our standards really high. These are the things that we're signing up for. We're signing up for not working, 20 hours a day. I don't believe that's really real. I think there are times when you might have to work 20 hours for some period of time, but not all the time. It doesn't work that way. So, we work hard, we do what we need to do, but, expect it to take longer, expect it to take more money than we think, expect to be disappointed, expect to have to climb up the hill multiple times to make things go. I hope that answers your question. Okay, Shrey asks, any ideas about US FM? My eyes are getting bad on me. FMCG industry. Okay, I don't know what the FMCG industry is. I apologize. So I really can't answer your question in terms of how fast do they move in funding rounds. What I can tell you, this is actually another thing in terms of what do we sign up for on fundraising specifically. Fundraising takes longer than you think. It isn't like a blink of an eye and people give you term sheets. That's only on, what is it, Shark Tank, that you see that. Just doesn't work that way in reality. It takes time. Unless we're really lucky, it takes time. The average time, I would say, it takes about 6 months, plus or minus. So give yourself a year. So it takes time to raise money. You meet with people, and it's kind of like this feeling of hurry up and wait. You have a meeting with somebody, it goes really well, and then you don't hear from them for a couple of weeks. That's fundraising. That's the way it goes. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, next question. We're in digital health. US is the ideal market for us. We're planning to raise a $5 million round to help us get started in the US. And you have no presence here. And are you able, I mean, there's so many questions. This is what makes this challenging. And I'm going to give a little plug for something else in just a second here, but it's really challenging to go back and forth on these questions because I don't know all the details. But I'm just going to speculate here that it could be because you have no traction in the United States that people are looking at this going too much risk. If you had a small amount of traction in the US and we were able to build up our revenue beyond that, then I would say, okay, great, you just need money to scale. And maybe that would be the answer. So it's hard to tell. Now for my little plug. So all of this is free, and I love doing this, and I love interacting with people. And I have a community, by the way, called Zero to Pitch, which is also free, a free community for startup CEOs. You want to ask questions in there, you can. There's a lot of interaction with people, and that community is growing really fast. There is also a paid community if you want to go faster, if you want to learn more, called Zero to Pitch Gold. And you can see the link when you get on Zero to Pitch. There's a link for that on my YouTube page that you can get to. And you can look at the Zero to Pitch Gold as well. There's a free 14-day money back guarantee on that, so you can't beat it. So if you want to try it and give it a whirl, you can do that. Now, the beautiful thing is I have daily office hours on Zero to Pitch Gold. And in my daily office hours, they're not in a webinar format like we're dealing with today. They're in a Zoom meeting format. So we can go back and forth. You can ask me questions. I can help you in a lot more detail than I can here. So that's my plug. I'll probably plug it some more as we go through this today. But if you want to go faster, you want to get to more detail, find out about Zero to Pitch Gold. That'll help you a lot more. Okay. Next question. Best ways to market a IELTS, I don't know that acronym, EdTech platform. Okay, so this again, there's so many different ways to do things. I'm going to give you a great resource to help you. There's a wonderful book on this subject called Traction by Gabriel Weinberg. I highly recommend it. It's a fantastic book on figuring out which marketing channel will work. Now, channels, interesting. Marketing channels are kind of like fundraising. They depend upon your financial resources. They depend upon where you are in your business life. So all these things matter, when we're determining a marketing channel. And he goes through about 19 of them and has a very systematic way for you to look at this. Great weekend read. Fantastic resource. So I highly recommend that. All right, let's move on to our next question. Okay, DG asks, I'm not sure who DG is, but DG asks, what pot of equity do founders give to key senior leadership hires? Is this from the founders pool or ESOP? If they are founders, it is not part of your employee stock option plan, which is what ESOP stands for. It is founders stock. It is stock. It is not stock options, which is an option to buy stock. It means I own that equity. Now, simple comment on all of this. You want to have equity vest over time. So if we're giving stock options to co-founders, and we know that the rate of failure on co-founders is around 50% or higher, that means about half of your co-founders are not going to work out. And we don't want to be sitting there if we give a co-founder 40% of a company. It's like you and your co-founder, it's like a 60-40 split between the two of you. And the co-founder doesn't work out. And suddenly you've got this 40% equity that you've given to somebody, which is a real problem to deal with. There are ways around it. But it's not so easy. So we want to have equity vest over time. And the way to do this is we have typically a 4-year vesting period for equity. By the way, you do this for stock options as well with a 1-year cliff, which means for the first year, you don't vest anything until that 12th month when you vest a quarter of your stock. So if you do this, and typically most founders are going to flame out in the first year, then it's like no harm, no foul. In other words, if there's an issue, you don't have the problem, right? You can get rid of the person and everybody moves on with their lives. And I'm not saying this to screw people because that's the wrong way to think of things. Anyways, that's how I would do that. I hope that answers your question. Yes. Okay, so Christopher says, who's part of Zero to Pitch Gold, he said gold is well worth it. I agree, Christopher. Darren asked specifically, C-suite hires want equity. Of course they do. So anybody that you hire who you're going to bring on as a co-founder, or you're going to hire people into who are vice presidents and above, they're going to want equity. So if they are hired and they're not founders, then they're part of your employee stock option pool. If they are founders, then they get pure stock. That's the way it works. Hope that answers your question. Let's move on to our next question. Okay. Oh, FM. Thank you for that, by the way. So somebody answered what FMCG means. It means fast moving consumer goods. Okay, thank you. I did not know that. Thank you very much. Okay, so next question. How to generate a pipeline of 200 plus investors? I didn't get a great response from the cold emails I sent. Okay, well, first the pipeline, I went over that at the beginning, which is you can start networking with people like crazy. That's the first thing I would do. And if you're doing $1 million ARR, which you are, you probably already have some angel investors that are working with you or whatever, and they're people that should be interested. $1 million in ARR is nothing to sneeze at. So I would start networking like crazy, asking everybody I come in contact with if they can help me. And if they say no, do you know anybody who might be able to help me? And you'll be amazed at how quickly your network grows. So that's one way to do it. Second way to do it is you can just start building out a list of investors to talk to. As I talked about, you can use Crunchbase to do that. Now, you're saying your cold email didn't work really well. Again, it could be the cold email. So I have a video on this about how to find and get in contact with investors. You can look at that. I also, on my website, brettjfox.com, I have a blog post on this exact subject about how to write a cold email. I go over it in the video. I go over it in the blog post about how to do this well. There's an art to it. And if we don't get the art right, then we're going to get a lot of non-response. That's very possible. It also could be your targeting. You're targeting the wrong investors. Any and all of these things are possible. So I'm hoping that helps, but that's the answer. Okay, this is actually a really, really good question that Shrey is asking here. And Shrey asks, do we constantly reach back out to investors to get back to us? Or do we just wait for them? Okay, this is a fantastic question because investors are notorious for not being the best at responding to people. And it feels like you've gone into a black hole. I know the feeling. There's like this feeling of exhilaration when we send out the cold emails or whatever, or start requesting meetings with people, and then we get nothing back. Or even worse, you meet with an investor and you never hear back from them again. So what do? The answer is that we become what's called a polite pest. It doesn't mean that we sit there and every day reach out to somebody we met with and said, hey, you haven't called me back. Why not? That's not going to cut it. And you're just going to piss people off if you do that. So you don't do that. Instead, if we meet with somebody on, let's say we're on a Thursday today when this is being filmed. So let's say it's a Thursday. I might wait until next Wednesday, to write the person back and follow up. Now there's an art to following up. And the way I might follow up is ideally with the non-follow, what I call the non-follow-up follow-up. Now, what is the non-follow-up follow-up? The non-follow-up follow-up is you want to create FOMO, fear of missing out on your opportunities. So if we can sprinkle in to our follow-ups with people, hey, we just had this great event happen. Hey, we just signed up this customer. Hey, we just completed this part of our development, whatever it might be. Each time we follow up with people, the people on the other side get the feeling, wow, this company's going somewhere. Is it going to help? Who knows? But that's a nice way to follow up. You're just reminding them, hey, I'm here. And maybe you'll hear from them. Maybe you won't. Now, I might do that after 1 week, I'd follow up. And then I might wait 2 weeks for the next follow-up and so forth and so on. It's hard. What I will tell you also, and I know this doesn't make anybody feel good, is that when investors want to talk to you, they will talk to you. Full stop. Now, I'm going to tell you a story of why you want to follow up regardless of this, but most of the time, I'd say 90% of the time, if investors want to talk to you, they're going to talk to you. They're going to find a way to reach out to you. They'll get back to you. However, that's not always the case, and that's why we do the non-follow-up follow-up. For example, when I was raising our Series B round, one of our investors, one of the investors in our syndicate, after giving us a term sheet, and when we were in the middle of closing, went completely dark on us. Didn't return phone calls, didn't return emails, nothing. And we had existing investors, didn't return my investors' phone calls, emails. We had no idea what was going on. Crazy. So finally, after about, 3 weeks of complete radio silence, we were wondering what in the hell is going on with this guy. Finally, after 3 weeks, he writes us back. His son had been in the hospital, seriously ill. I don't know whether he was on the verge of dying, but it was a pretty serious illness that the son had. And he completely apologized, et cetera, and all was well. So that's why you want to be polite when you follow up. You never know what's happening on the other side. And I'm glad we did it the way we did. We were very polite about it. We were very nice about it. And the relationship continued very positively rather than there being bad blood between us and the potential investor. So anyways, that's my pitch for being a polite pest. Next question. What startup ideas or sector will you fund if you have to in 2024 according to your expertise? Well, my expertise is in semiconductors, so that's the only thing that I would get involved with as an investor. And this goes back to kind of the point about investors being very much specific in what they do, is I'm not an expert in certain areas, so why am I going to increase my risk? And the answer is I'm not going to increase my risk. So that's the only area that I would invest in, full stop. Because the other ones I'm increasing risk, so I'm just not going to do it. Are lawsuits? So another really good question. Are lawsuits something every startup will deal with? The answer is no. Not every startup's going to get sued. However, you need a good lawyer. You need a good general counsel. I would tell you that it's worth the money, to spend it, because you never know when things are going to come up. Also, kind of as a rule, we don't budget for lawsuits. You don't want to have in your budget, hey, I'm expecting to get sued. I wouldn't recommend that. So no, no, I don't think I would do that. But I would have a good lawyer, because all sorts of stuff comes up when we start a company, and you want good lawyers for all the various things you need. For example, we talked about employees. We talked about stock options for employees. All of that, it requires lawyers. Setting up your company properly requires lawyers. Closing a term sheet, if you want to do it right, and closing your round of funding requires a lawyer, so you don't end up with horrible terms that could screw you. All these things get influenced by having good lawyers around you. So that's the answer. But no, not every company gets sued. Okay, if you have questions for me, you can put them in the comments column. If you're watching on Zoom, put them in the comments column on Zoom. If you're watching me on YouTube, you can put them in the chat box. Actually, excuse me, it's actually the chat box on Zoom and the chat box on YouTube. And if you want to, even on Zoom, you can put them in the Q&A box as well. And I'll be happy to answer the questions. The Zoom followers get priority, by the way, over you YouTube followers, just so you know. Next question. How do I sell a software product if it's just software and it's B2, can't read this, B2C, is that right? B2C, okay, it's B2C. Well, again, this goes back to, what are we trying to do? And I'm going to put again a pitch in for Zero to Pitch Gold. And in terms of being able to answer questions more specifically, because this is such a broad question, it's almost impossible to answer on a platform like this. Where it's one way communication. You're communicating to me in writing. I'm trying to answer the question verbally. There's just too much back and forth. And I don't know what your price points are. I don't know who your customers are. I don't know what the dynamics are of the customer. All these things are going to go into how to sell. What I would tell you is early on, depending upon where you are, early on sales, one thing I would tell you also, unless you're selling something at a really low price point, sales, especially at the beginning, are going to be very dependent upon you as the CEO. You're going to have to do the selling. If you farm it out to anybody on your team, if you hire somebody from the outside to try and do the selling for you, your odds of failure are going to go way, 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 way up. You've got to be the one selling. Okay, TYSM. Don't know what that acronym means. I apologize for that. If you'll write it in the chat box for me so I can realize my ignorance some more. Okay. What was your worst experience with an employee? Oh, wow. Okay. The worst experience I had with an employee was this guy who I hired. I'm going to call him Tommy. Tommy's not his real name. I hired Tommy as our vice president of sales was literally the worst hire I ever made in my career. And I knew it. And I knew it almost before I hired him. He was a disaster. He came highly recommended from two of my board members who had worked with him before. And he just was lazy, didn't want to work hard. And I think really, in all honesty, he wanted a different job. And you can guess what the different job was. And it was just a mess. And I knew it. I knew he wasn't very good. And he didn't fit. He also didn't fit culturally in the company. I'll come back to this in a second. So he was a disaster, and he almost destroyed our company, in the process, because he was it just didn't work out, and I knew it. And when you have somebody like that, and it was in the middle of raising money too, so it was just a mess. And my investors didn't want me to tell our new investors that I was going to let him go. And they wanted me to keep him, and it was a real mess. And I decided that he needed to go anyways, and he quit, which was perfect, because it saved a lot of pain because he quit. But then my investors didn't want me to tell my new investors that he had quit. And I decided, screw it, I'm going to tell the new investors that he quit, which was a smart thing to do, because in their diligence on him, they knew there might be an issue with this guy. So you build integrity by telling the truth. He was the worst. So one of the things, though, when you're looking for employees, a couple comments. Number one is they've got to fit your criterion. You need integrity. You need people that are smart, and in my humble opinion, you need people that are really good at what they do. They've got to be the best of the best, especially if you're hiring at the C level or VP, vice president level. They got to be excellent at what they do. And they've got to be passionate and maybe fanatical about what you're doing as well. You need those four things. And when I look at Tommy, he wasn't fanatical. He didn't have integrity. I don't think he was very good, quite frankly. So what in the hell was I doing? And I kind of knew it. I kind of knew something was off about the guy, but I bought into the fact my investors liked him. My investors thought he was good. And it was a mistake. And it's my mistake, not their mistake. It was my mistake for hiring the guy. So that's the lesson on this. So be careful when you hire, especially senior people, because they can really cause huge problems for you. Next question. What are the common mistakes founders make when starting a startup? Well, gosh, there's so many of them, almost too many to count. But let's see, the ones that come to mind off the top of my head are, number one, I would say spending money on the wrong things. Number two, hiring the wrong people. I'd say that's a biggie. So we spend money too quickly. We hire the wrong people. We hire people that are convenient because we need people. We're a little desperate, especially at the beginning. So we're happy anybody joins us, and the quality of the people isn't good. That'll sink you in a heartbeat. Thinking we have traction when we don't. That's another one that can happen. Thinking that revenue is going to come quicker than we believe it will, and spending money ahead of the revenue, spending money on the wrong things, on the wrong tools, on the wrong systems when we don't need it, and we don't need to spend the money on them. Those are things that come to mind. I'm sure there are many more. I know I've written on this. I don't know whether I've done a video on this, but I know I've written about this, about all the mistakes that we can make at the beginning, and there are a lot. So those are the ones that come to my mind off the top of my head. There are probably more. I'm sure there are, but those are the ones that pop in. So I hope that helps. If you have questions for me, please put them in the chat box on either Zoom or YouTube. If you're watching me on YouTube, if you're watching me on Zoom, you can also put them in the Q&A box as well. I'm going to take a drink of water here because I've been talking for close to 40 minutes. All right, let's see what we got next. Okay, Darren asks, where should the market size slide go in our pitch deck? Right after the problem section or in the financial section? No, it should go right after the problem slide. If you look at my pitch deck template, which is available to everybody who's listening to this call. If you don't have it already, you can get it automatically by clicking on a link to just about any of my videos. Have a link to my Start a Pitch Deck template. That's the order of your slides. So the market slide should typically go pretty much right after. Typically, the way that I would do it is problem slide, solution slide, then team slide, then maybe the how it works slide, and then the market slide, or market slide how it works slide. I can't remember which way it goes. But it wants to be pretty early on in there because I want to validate, if I'm on the investor side of this, that the market makes sense to me and how you think about the market makes sense. So that's how I would do it. Hope that answers your question. Let's go to our next question here. Your videos are amazing, so informative. Thank you. Appreciate that. Then the same person asks, do you recommend, is it a good approach to quote unquote start a startup right after college or during college? I mean, you are free and you're not risking your job position since you don't have one yet. Haha. Okay, well, it's a very personal decision. I mean, you look at, they're very successful people. I can think of 3 off the top of my head that have done it, right? That we all know. Steve Jobs, can't remember what he did Apple, right? He didn't finish college. I remember that. Bill Gates didn't finish college, and Mark Zuckerberg didn't finish college. I don't know. Those people are the exception after the rule. Look, my daughter's in college now, and if she was to say, "Hey, Dad, I'm going to quit college and start a company," I would probably, as a parent, urge her not to do that because the odds of success are pretty low. However, if you believe you're in the Steve Jobs category or the Mark Zuckerberg category or the Bill Gates category, then sure, go for it because of the reasons that you are, but you won't have that degree. And it would be nice if you could have the degree to fall back on. That's my point. Okay, next question. Sujay asks, I hope I got that right. What do you do if top level accelerators are biased and only to invest in Ivy League founders like Y Combinator or Techstars? How should a non-Ivy League founder can raise pre-seed funding excluding family? Okay, first of all, I don't think you're right at all. I don't believe that. I don't buy that at all. I do not have an Ivy League education. I raised money. In fact, if I think about pretty much every person I'm working with in my one-on-one business, I don't think any of them have an Ivy League education and they were able to raise money. And when I think about in my Zero to Pitch Gold community, the people there that are raising money and are moving along at a good rate, I don't think any of them have an Ivy League education. So no, I don't buy that. I'm sorry. I just don't. I think if you're having trouble, it's more because of you, I hate to say this, than it is Ivy League education. That's being lazy. It means something's wrong with the pitch. It means your company's not ready yet to raise money. By the way, trying to get into Y Combinator is not easy. It's the best of the best. It is a really high level program for people who want to do an accelerator. I think they're fantastic, by the way. And I know people who've done that program, and I don't think any of them have an Ivy League education either. So look at yourself. Don't blame the education. Look at yourself. The issue's there. It's not with them. They're looking for the best opportunities and the best people. And just because I went to Harvard doesn't mean I'm capable of running a company. It's nice, looks good, but it's not enough. Okay, I'm going to try and pronounce this next name here, and I apologize in advance. Sabawoon, I hope that I got that right, asks, how can we collect user feedback in the early stages? And how can we use this feedback to improve our software? Okay, well, start talking to customers. That's what I would do. I talk to every, I mean, I'm imagining again, this is what makes this challenging. Again, yet another reason to join Zero to Pitch Gold, because we can have a better conversation than this. But without knowing and assuming that you have some sort of product and you have some idea of what you're doing, it must have been based on customers at some level. So talk to customers. This is the simplest, most direct thing we can do, depending upon what we're trying to do, is just start talking to people, get their feedback. And there are three simple questions you can ask people. What do you like? What do you dislike? And what would you like to see next? So three simple questions you can ask. You can also try doing surveys and things like that, using a tool like SurveyMonkey if you want. But the closer you get to customers, the more direct the conversations are with customers, the better off you're going to be. But really start talking to customers. If you're the CEO, get out there, get in front of customers, because this is one of the great things about talking to customers is even if they say, no, I don't want to buy your product, it gives you a great way to learn, well, why not? What is it you're looking for? What aren't we doing well? Who are you going to buy instead? How do you solve this problem? There are a million questions to ask. I hope that helps. Boy, I'm getting a whole education today on various acronyms. Thank you, Mike. Too much of anything is bad for you. Does that apply to a startup if it grows too fast in the beginning stage? That's a really good question. Well, if you're not prepared for it, then the answer is yes. You have to look at, this is actually it's a subtly good question. And what I mean by that is that when we're thinking about building our company, we have to look at what's the constraint in the system. If you think about all the different things that go into growing a startup, you have to think about the constraint. In other words, what's going to hold us back? Is it market? And what you're saying is, hey, our market could grow super quick. Well, then maybe it's not market. Then is it team? Do we have the team capable of keeping up with the speed of the market? Is it money? You get the idea. All these various things. Is it equipment? Is it software? Is it whatever? We want to look at the constraints in our system and improve those constraints so we're better suited to helping customers. Okay, next question on our list. Getting near the end time of today anyways, so let's see what we've got. So we'll answer a few more questions, hopefully. Do you think it is a good approach to quote unquote copy an already working idea in another country and repeat it in another country? Some say it is quote unquote the easier path, but you meet SB who have done it. Okay. Well, again, I'm going to keep pitching my Zero to Pitch Gold program in terms of the community, because this gives us a better chance to chat. It's really hard to tell because there's so many particulars here that we don't have an answer to in terms of understanding. Yeah, you can think about, copycat things that have worked in one place and you can then quote unquote copy in another place. Sure. I would buy that. Interestingly enough, when I started my company, part of our strategy was a quote unquote copycat strategy because it allowed us to get to market quicker with existing customers. So there's validation in doing those things. You have to make sure you're not violating patents, you're not violating copyrights, whatever those various things are. In our case, we made very sure we weren't violating any patents because we were competing against very large companies in our space, and we were able to do it. So sure, it'll work. In our case, interestingly enough, that strategy didn't work. It worked later, but it was our whole strategy, our whole point at the beginning was, hey, we can get to market faster and save money, which was a big issue in the analog semiconductor industry. And it turned out that our quote unquote proprietary products, our unique products, sold better, faster, quicker. We had two strategies going at once. And we made the assumption that our proprietary products would take longer. They went faster, which was great in the long run. So it all worked out. Okay, Rafa asks, hi, Brett. Does it possible, or is it possible, to find the VC in the US who will have the willingness to deal with startups from Belgium? Okay, this question was asked earlier, and pretty much every time I do an AMA, I think I get asked a version of this question. Yeah, it's possible. That, and if I wanted to, I could just end there. But the reality is it's harder. If you're in Belgium, and I know that, to repeat myself, I know the market for investors in Belgium is not like it is in the United States, but it's going to be easier for you to find people in Belgium. If you can't find people in Belgium, then I would go to the Netherlands. If I couldn't find people in the Netherlands, then I'd go to Luxembourg, right? Go to the Benelux area first, and then start reaching out, branching out from there, maybe to France, maybe to Germany, maybe to the UK. The US is going to be harder because it's further away, and proximity matters, especially for early stage companies. Doesn't mean it can't be done. It is done all the time, but it's easier to find people in your own region. That's the point. Okay. Got time for a few more questions here before we have to go. Another question, this one from my Zoom feed. Is the serviceable obtainable market SOM a modest percentage or dollar figure of my total addressable market, TAM? Well, it's going to be a subset. The way that I think of things is the served available market. You're calling it SOM, I call it SAM. Served available market. This is the market that we can go after today. And that's going to be a subset. And there are going to be a couple things which are going to, let's say our TAM, the total available market, this is our long-term vision of where we're going. And let's say the TAM, I'm going to pick a number. Let's say it's $10 billion. Okay, huge number, right? Well, let's just say it's 10 billion. In our served market, because our product set is going to be smaller, that's going to dilute it, let's say, to $1 billion. And then because our marketing channels are going to be less, let's say that dilutes it to $500 million. That's our served market. That's the way I would look at it. Hope that answers your question. The served market will continue to grow as the company grows. Okay. The next question we have is, what is the best marketing strategy to use early on in startups to grow? Way too broad. Impossible to answer. Somebody asked this question at the beginning of today's AMA session. I'll give you the same answer. The best resource I can give you, the best way to look at this, there's a fantastic book called Traction by Gabriel Weinberg. Highly recommend it to anybody trying to figure out their marketing strategy at any stage of their company's life. He'll give you a very systematic way of looking at this. So highly recommend that book. All right. Let me drink just a little bit more water. I think I've got time for maybe one or two more questions. If you have them for me, just put them in the chat box and I'll be happy to answer them for you. Or the Q&A box if you are on if you're on Zoom, watching me on Zoom. Either way. Hang on, I think we've got something there actually in the Q&A box. All right, somebody asks, okay, for a landing page call to action for B2B software that is in production and available, what are examples you've observed that are initial and good indicators of qualifying active interest versus passive curiosity? I think what you're asking for, I'm not exactly sure, but I think what you're asking is, if somebody reaches out to me, how do I know they're real? Well, it's all in the qualifying questions that you ask people. So that's the way I would do it. I would develop a list of questions where, and you know this better than I do, I don't know your business. And again, if you're watching this and you're obviously a member of my Zero to Pitch program, consider joining Zero to Pitch Gold, because we can give you a better answer. Or maybe in the Zero to Pitch community, you'll get the answer to your question. But what I can tell you is that what I would do if I was in your shoes, I would think about, here are the 3 or 4 questions that I can use to qualify customers. And that's what's going to tell you that. Hopefully your flow, whatever your flow is on your website, puts them through some sort of simple funnel where you get that answer and that tells you. Hope that answers your question. All right, let's go to maybe the final questions we're going to answer today. Got two of them on here. Should I raise funds as a solo technical founder with just an idea, or should I build a working prototype? I can almost guarantee you, without knowing who you are, that Mukesh, it's going to be, unless you have a reputation of being able to make people money. This is just the hard reality of the world today. It's going to be really difficult to raise money as a solo founder. Now, I don't know who we're talking about raising money from. Are we talking about raising money from angel investors? Maybe, but it's going to have to be a really small amount of money. We're talking about venture capitalists. You can almost guarantee it won't be possible. What I would tell you is that unless you've made money for people and you have a track record of success, it's going to be really difficult to raise that money. So who are we talking about if you need funds? Friends, family, consider a co-founder because you're going to need people anyways in your company, and yourself. That's going to be your funding. Okay, final question I think for today is what are the best tools to automate full digital ads for beginners? This is not my area of expertise. I truly apologize. I don't know. I honestly don't know what would be the best tools to automate digital ads, for beginners. I would just tell you be careful, at the beginning, because you want to be careful with your ad spend at the beginning. Don't spend a ton of money. Okay, I'm going to answer one more question. This is from Maggie, because I've got one more minute still on my timer here. What about raising money as a solo founder with a company that has traction? Awesome. Go do it. One of the billion-dollar companies I'm involved with, that person was a solo founder. Go raise money. Go have at it. Now, having said that, one of the things that you're going to have, this is going to seem counterintuitive to you, but one of the things that you're going to have to answer, even if you're a solo founder, is how are you going to build out your team? Depending upon what you're doing. Maybe your business is something where it's just a solo business, but in most cases, we need a team as we go on. I have a video which you can find on YouTube about how to raise money as a solo founder. Watch it. It'll go through all of this for you. All right, with that, we have reached the end of today. So I'm going to call it a day. I've got to run, but thank you so much, everybody, for participating today. I'll be back hopefully again next week. So take care. Bye. Bye to my YouTube, bye to my Zoom audience too.